You've entered void of rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple: subscribe. We're almost at 9,000 corrupted souls, but the void hungers for more. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers before this year bleeds into darkness. Will you join our legion, or face the consequences of defying the void? Now let's dive into today's story. What if the secrets to humanity's greatest challenges aren't in our future, but hidden in our forgotten past? Tonight I did something extraordinary. I summoned a deity whose name has been erased from history, all to uncover the lost wisdom that could redefine everything we think we know. Be warned, some knowledge is truly chilling. My name is Dr. Theodore Whitmore, and this is my confession. 9 months ago, my life was predictable. I taught comparative mythology at a small college in Vermont, lived alone in a modest apartment filled with books, and spent my evenings grading papers while drinking cheap whiskey. I was content, if not happy, unremarkable, if not invisible. Then the letter arrived. It came on a Monday morning in November, delivered by registered mail from a law firm in Prague. The envelope was thick, expensive paper, and bore a wax seal I didn't recognize. Inside, a brief letter informed me that my uncle, Leonid Whitmore, had died 3 weeks prior. Heart failure, they said. He was 73 years old. I hadn't spoken to Uncle Leonid since I was 12 years old. He was my father's younger brother, the family eccentric who'd spent 4 decades travelling the remote corners of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. My father called him a waste of potential, a brilliant linguist who'd thrown away a promising academic career to chase fantasies. At family gatherings, Uncle Leonid would tell stories about ancient temples and forgotten gods, his eyes bright with enthusiasm that made the adults uncomfortable. After my parents divorced, the family fractured, and I lost contact with him entirely. The letter explained that I was his sole heir. His entire estate had been left to me. Tucked inside the legal documents was a handwritten note on yellowed paper. I recognized Uncle Leonid's spidery handwriting immediately. Theodore, I found it, the source. Forgive me for passing this burden to you. Destroy everything, or finish what I couldn't. There is no middle path. Yours in regret, Leonid. I should have burned it all right there. Instead, I booked a flight to Prague. The estate was a crumbling townhouse in the Malastrana district, wedged between a tourist cafe and a closed antique shop. The building dated to the 18th century, all narrow staircases and low doorways that forced me to duck. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and something else, something mineral and ancient. Every surface was covered in research. Maps pinned to walls with red string connecting various locations. Photographs of archaeological sites. Some I recognized. Most I didn't. Linguistic charts showing the evolution of alphabets and scripts, but with additions and corrections in Uncle Leonid's handwriting. Stacks of journals, leather-bound and filled with notes in 6 different languages. It took me 3 days just to understand the scope of his obsession. Uncle Leonid had spent his life pursuing a single question. Where did human language truly begin? Not the evolution of language, which is well documented, not Proto-Indo-European, or the various language families we know. He was searching for the origin point, the moment when language first entered human consciousness. His journals traced a theory that grew more elaborate and more troubling with each volume. He believed that all human languages descended from a single source that predated modern Homo sapiens. That language hadn't evolved naturally, but had been given to us, implanted, taught, by what he never explicitly said. But his notes circled around it, dancing at the edges of an idea that he seemed terrified to name directly. I found expedition reports documenting trips to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, but his focus wasn't on the temple complex that archaeologists had excavated. He'd bribed local officials to access caverns beneath the site, places that weren't on any official survey. There were photographs of pictograms that didn't match any known prehistoric art. The symbols were carved into stone that showed no tool marks, as if they'd been burned into the rock by something other than human hands. Cave systems in the Altai Mountains with carved symbols that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of the light. A submerged structure off the coast of India that no archaeological database acknowledged. Each location, he claimed, predated known civilization by thousands of years, and at each site he found the same thing: traces of a linguistic system that shouldn't exist. What disturbed me most was the consistency. Uncle Leonid had spent decades verifying his findings, returning to sites multiple times, bringing in colleagues under false pretenses to confirm what he was seeing. He wasn't chasing a delusion, he was methodically documenting something real, something that contradicted everything we understood about human history. In one journal entry from 1987, he wrote, "Returned to the Altai site with Hammond, told him we were surveying for petroglyphs. He saw them too, the symbols that change. I watched his face when he realized what he was looking at. He hasn't returned my calls since we got back. Some people can't handle having their worldview shattered. I wonder if I can." On my 4th day in Prague, I found the locked trunk. It sat in the corner of what had been his bedroom, underneath a rotting tapestry. The lock was modern, industrial strength, completely out of place in the antique-filled house. I had to break it open with a crowbar. Inside, wrapped in silk that crumbled at my touch, was a stone tablet. It was perhaps 12 inches square, made of black volcanic glass, so smooth it felt almost wet. The surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Carved into it were symbols, glyphs unlike anything I'd seen in my years of studying ancient scripts, and they moved. Not constantly, not obviously, but when I looked at one symbol, then looked away, and back again, it had changed, shifted, rearranged itself into a new configuration. I thought it was an optical illusion, a trick of the grain in the stone. But I tested it over and over. The symbols were genuinely changing. I took photographs with my phone, comparing them minute by minute. The changes were real, documentable, impossible. Beneath the tablet was a leather folder containing Uncle Leonid's translation notes. His handwriting grew progressively more erratic across the pages, the neat academic script I remembered from his early journals, deteriorating into desperate scrawls. The tablet was instructions, a method to call forth something he called the first voice, the one who spoke language into existence. The final page was dated 3 days before his death. I've translated the name. I know how to speak it now, but I can't. God forgive me. I want to, but I can't. The price is too high. Theodore, if you're reading this, you were always the curious one. Braver than your father, braver than me. Or perhaps more foolish. The question isn't whether this works. I believe it does. The question is what it costs to know. I've spent 40 years searching for the origin of language, and now that I've found it, I'm too afraid to take the final step. Perhaps that makes me a coward. Perhaps it makes me wise. I'll never know. But you, Theodore, you were always the one who had to know. Even as a child, you couldn't leave a mystery alone. So I'm giving you the choice I couldn't make. Destroy it all or finish what I started. But know this. Once you speak the name, there's no going back. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. I packed everything. The tablet, the journals, all of Leonid's notes. I shipped it back to Vermont and told no one. For 2 months, I tried to forget about it. I went back to teaching, fell into my old routines. But every night, I'd dream of that black glass tablet. I'd dream of standing in vast empty spaces where no light existed, where sound moved in ways that violated physics. I'd dream of voices speaking in languages that predated language itself, and I'd wake with my throat raw, bleeding from the inside, as if I'd been screaming in my sleep. My doctor said it was a stress, prescribed sleeping pills that didn't help. The dreams only got worse, more vivid, more insistent. In January, I gave up pretending. I told my department chair I needed a sabbatical to work on my book. I rented a cabin in the White Mountains, 40 minutes from the nearest town, and told everyone I needed isolation to write. It wasn't entirely a lie, I just didn't mention what I'd actually be doing. The translation took weeks. Uncle Leonid's notes were brilliant, but incomplete. The glyphs on the tablet weren't meant to be read sequentially. Like normal writing, they were dimensional. Three-dimensional linguistic structures compressed onto a flat surface. I spent 2 weeks building a physical model using wire and transparent plastic sheets. Each glyph had to be overlaid on top of the others at specific angles. When I finally got the alignment correct, they merged into a single complex symbol. A name. But it was more than just a name. It was a key. A way to unlock something that had been sealed away from human perception. I spoke it aloud for the first time on a Friday afternoon, alone in the cabin. Esh-Marruk. The sound felt wrong coming out of my mouth. My tongue wasn't shaped correctly for it. The syllables required movements that human vocal anatomy shouldn't be able to produce. But I managed it somehow. The lights flickered. Every plant I'd brought to make the cabin feel less sterile, 3 ferns and a potted ivy, died instantly. Not wilted, desiccated. Turned to brittle husks as if decades had passed in seconds. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in the span of a breath. I could see my breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. And for just a moment, I heard something. A whisper at the very edge of perception, like wind through dead trees. Except there was no wind. I should have stopped. I should have burned the tablet and scattered the ashes. Instead, I became obsessed. The ritual itself was disturbingly simple. Uncle Leonid's notes outlined 3 requirements. Speak the name 3 times. Offer something that cannot be replaced. Ask your question in complete honesty, without self-deception or hidden motive. That was all. But his sources, fragments from texts I couldn't fully verify, included warnings. Those who hear the first voice go silent. The tongue giver takes tongues in return. To know the origin is to forget the present. These warnings appeared in multiple sources, separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of years. A Sumerian clay fragment, a medieval manuscript from a monastery in Armenia, a verbal tradition recorded by a Jesuit missionary in the Amazon in 1743. All of them describing the same entity, using different names but always referring to the same concept, the thing that gave humans speech, and the terrible price it demands from those who seek it directly. I convinced myself these were metaphors, ancient cultures warning against hubris, the same way every mythology warned against seeking divine knowledge. I was a trained academic, rational, skeptical by nature. I'd spent my career analysing myths, understanding them as cultural artifacts, products of human psychology and social needs. I wasn't going to let superstition stop me from completing the most important research of my life. I chose March 17th for the ritual, the vernal equinox, a time of balance. Uncle Leonid's notes suggested that timing mattered, that the boundary between our world and whatever space Esh-Marruk inhabited was thinner at certain times. The equinox was one of them. The week before, I isolated completely. I stopped answering emails, turned off my phone. I drove to the cabin with enough supplies to last 2 weeks. I set up cameras on tripods in every corner of the main room. If this worked, I'd need documentation. if it didn't, I'd at least have evidence of my failure. My offering was a leather journal containing everything they'd ever written. 20 years of work. My academic papers, published and unpublished. My half-finished novel about a professor who discovers his dead languages aren't quite dead. My private journals, raw and honest, in ways my published work never was. Everything that defined me as a thinker, as a writer, as a person who worked with words. It felt appropriate somehow. If I was going to speak to the origin of language, I should offer the thing that language had given me, my identity. The night before the ritual, I sat in front of one of the cameras and tried to explain myself. If this works, I'll have proven that human consciousness didn't evolve naturally, that we're not the architects of our own minds. That language, the thing that makes us human, was given to us by something else. If it doesn't work, I'll have wasted 3 months and my uncle's legacy on an elaborate delusion. I paused, trying to find the right words, but I don't think it's a delusion. Uncle Leonid was many things, but he wasn't a fool, and I think that's what killed him. Not heart failure. I think he tried to do this and couldn't complete it. I think attempting the ritual and backing out at the last moment is what stopped his heart. The body can't handle that kind of cognitive dissonance, seeing proof of something impossible and then trying to deny it, trying to unsee it. The stress of that contradiction literally killed him. I looked directly into the camera lens. I have to know, even if knowing destroys me. I have to know where we came from, where language came from, what we really are. Because if Uncle Leonid was right, if language was given to us rather than evolved, then everything we think we know about human history is wrong. The implications are staggering. It means we're not alone. It means we never were. It means something else shaped us, molded us, made us into what we are, and I need to know what that something is. March 17th arrived cold and clear. I fasted for 3 days, following instructions from one of Uncle Leonid's sources. The fast was supposed to clarify the mind, separate the physical from the mental. Mostly it just made me lightheaded and irritable. But there was something else too. A clarity that came with the hunger. A sharpness to my thoughts that I hadn't experienced before. Colours seemed more vivid, sounds more distinct. As if removing food had removed some kind of filter between me and raw sensory experience. I arranged candles in the specific configuration Uncle Leonid had documented. 7 candles forming a pattern that looked like a star, but with one extra point. An 8-pointed star that hurt to look at for too long. Something about its geometry fundamentally wrong. The angles didn't add up correctly. Looking at it too long made my eyes water and my head ache. The black glass tablet sat on a wooden table in the centre of the room. I placed my journal beside it, 20 years of my life reduced to a stack of filled pages. I'd read through it the night before, revisiting old thoughts, old versions of myself preserved in ink. It was like looking at photographs of a stranger who happened to have my face. The person who wrote those entries seemed so certain, so confident in his understanding of the world. I envied him. At exactly 9 in the evening, I began. I spoke the name, Esh-Marruk, once. The air pressure changed immediately. I felt it in my ears, that hollow pop you get on an airplane. The candle flames bent sideways, all of them at the same angle, as if blown by a wind that didn't exist. But more than that, I felt something shift. Not in the room, but in my perception. As if a door had opened somewhere I couldn't see, and something was now paying attention to me. Esh-Marruk. Twice. My voice cracked. I tasted blood. Something in my throat tore from the strain of forming sounds human vocal cords weren't designed to make. My eyes burned. Later, watching the footage, I saw blood vessels burst in the whites of my eyes, spreading red like cracks in ice. But in the moment, I barely noticed the pain. I was too focused on what was happening in the room. The shadows were moving wrong, not cast by the candles, but moving independently, sliding across the walls like living things. The temperature continued to drop. My breath came out in great billowing clouds. Frost formed on the windows, spreading in fractal patterns that looked almost like writing. Esh-Marruk. 3 times silence. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. I stood there, breathing heavily, tasting copper. The candles returned to normal. The air pressure equalized. The shadows stopped moving. I thought I'd failed. I thought despite everything, despite all of Uncle Leonid's research and my careful preparation, it had all been a delusion after all. Then, my journal began to smoke. Not burning. The ink was lifting off the pages. Every word I'd ever written evaporating into black mist that hung in the air like oil smoke. I watched 20 years of work erase itself, letter by letter, word by word. The pages remained intact, but they were blank. Virgin paper, as if I'd never written anything at all. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the journal, save something, anything. But I couldn't move. My body wouldn't respond. My muscles had locked in place, frozen by something that wasn't cold or fear, but a kind of existential paralysis. I opened my mouth to speak my question, the reason I'd done all of this. How do we save ourselves? How do we stop humanity from destroying itself? The cameras recorded me speaking. But when I later reviewed the footage, there was no sound. Just dead air, my lips moving in silence. The question itself had been removed from reality, erased like the ink in my journal. And then it answered. I can't describe what happened next, not adequately. Language fails me, which I suppose is appropriate. I didn't see anything, not visually. There was no apparition, no manifestation of light or shadow, but I was suddenly aware of a presence, not in the room with me, but in my mind, behind my eyes, in the space between thought and speech. Information flooded into me, not words, not exactly. Pure meaning, raw understanding compressed into seconds. The experience of downloading decades of knowledge in the span of a heartbeat. It was overwhelming, terrifying, like trying to drink from a fire hose, except the water was made of pure concept, pure understanding, burning through my consciousness and rearranging everything it touched. I saw language being born. Not metaphorically, I witnessed the moment when the first human being formed the first intentional sound. Not a grunt or a cry, but a sound meant to carry meaning. A sound directed at another consciousness with the expectation of understanding. And in that moment of creation, something else was born. Esh-Marruk. It wasn't a god. It had never been a god. It was the first thing humanity created when we learned to speak. The first concept given form through language. An emergent consciousness, formed from the act of naming itself. It hadn't existed, and then it did. Called into being by the first word ever spoken with intent. And it remembered everything. Every language that had ever existed. Every word ever spoken. Every civilization that had risen and fallen. 10,000 years of human history, but also what came before. Because we weren't the first. This was the knowledge that made me laugh. Not hysteria, though it might have looked that way on the cameras. The laugh of someone who just understood a cosmic joke. We weren't the first time humans reached this level of development. We were the 4th iteration. 3 times before, humanity had climbed from primitive survival to complex civilization. 3 times we'd developed language, culture, technology. 3 times we'd built great cities and achieved wonders. And 3 times we'd fallen. Not from war or plague or natural disaster, from communication breakdown. Esh-Marruk showed me how it happened. Language becoming too complex, too divorced from meaning. Words multiplying faster than understanding. Communication that didn't communicate. People speaking but no longer truly connecting. No longer capable of genuine understanding. Conversations became performances. Writing became decoration. Speech became noise. And then the collapse. Not gradual but catastrophic. Everyone on Earth suddenly unable to understand each other. Not just across different languages, but within them. Words losing meaning mid-sentence. Speakers unable to make themselves understood even to themselves. Parents couldn't communicate with children. Lovers couldn't express their feelings. Scientists couldn't share discoveries. Teachers couldn't pass on knowledge. Total linguistic dissolution. Each time it happened, Esh-Marruk watched. Patient, eternal, waiting for the next iteration to arise, waiting to see if this time would be different. I saw the 3 civilizations that came before us. I can't tell you their names because they don't translate. The sounds don't exist in any modern language. They built things we'd call impossible. The first iteration, the oldest, developed a technology based on sound itself. They could manipulate matter using resonance frequencies, reshape stone with specific tones, heal injuries by singing the correct harmonics. Their cities were grown rather than built, structures coaxed into existence through patient acoustic cultivation. They lasted 8,000 years before the collapse took them. The second iteration understood time differently than we do. They didn't see it as linear, as a river flowing in one direction. They experienced it as a landscape that could be navigated. They built monuments that existed simultaneously in multiple moments, structures that were ruins and pristine buildings at the same time depending on how you approached them. They used this understanding to avoid disasters, to guide their civilization away from catastrophe. They lasted 6,000 years, longer than the first, because they could see the collapse coming and tried to prevent it. They failed. The third iteration developed a collective consciousness, not a hive mind, but a voluntary connection that allowed individuals to share thoughts and experiences directly. They eliminated misunderstanding by eliminating the need for language as a medium. They could transfer pure experience from one mind to another. They achieved peace, prosperity, a golden age that lasted 5,000 years. But language atrophied. It became ornamental, then vestigial, then forgotten. And when the connection broke, when the collective consciousness fractured for reasons Esh-Marruk didn't show me, they had no way to communicate anymore, no shared language to fall back on. They were isolated individuals who'd forgotten how to speak. They died alone, surrounded by millions of others who were equally alone. And now us. The fourth iteration. We're repeating the pattern, but in our own unique way. We're drowning in words that mean nothing. Social media, where everyone speaks but no one listens. News cycles that generate noise instead of information. Political discourse that's performance rather than communication. Marketing slogans that are designed to bypass meaning and trigger emotional responses directly. Corporate jargon that obscures rather than clarifies. Academic papers written to impress rather than communicate, buried under layers of unnecessarily complex language. Empty speech filling every silence, every moment, every possible space where meaning might exist. We're building toward the same collapse. The fourth iteration about to fail in exactly the same way as the 3 before it. Different details, same pattern. Esh-Marruk wasn't warning me. It wasn't trying to save us. It was just showing me the pattern, the mirror of what we've become. Holding up a reflection and asking without words, do you see it yet? Do you understand what you're doing to yourselves? It would watch us fall, then wait for the 5th iteration to arise. It had all the time in the world. Time meant nothing to something that existed in the space between thoughts. that lived in the eternal present of language itself. The presence withdrew. I stood there for 7 minutes, according to the camera timestamps, just staring at nothing. Tears streaming down my face. Then I started laughing, and I couldn't stop. The cameras recorded it all. Me, standing in that frozen room, surrounded by dead plants and dying candle flames, laughing like I'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. And maybe I had. The cosmic joke that humanity keeps telling itself. This time will be different. This time we'll get it right. This time we'll break the pattern. When I finally did stop laughing, when I could move again, I walked to the camera. I looked directly into the lens. And when I spoke, my voice sounded layered. Multiple versions of myself speaking slightly out of sync. It wasn't a god. It was never a god. It was the first thing we made when we learned to speak. The first concept given form through language, and it's been waiting, watching what we do with the gift it gave us, watching to see if we'll make the same mistakes as the 3 iterations before us, and we are. God help us, we are. I spent the next hour trying to explain what I'd learned. The cameras recorded all of it. I watched the footage later, and I sound insane. My explanations circle around ideas my vocabulary can't quite capture. I contradict myself, I use words incorrectly, fumbling for meaning that keeps slipping away. Because that's when I started to realize what I'd lost. The price. It showed me everything, I told the camera, my voice growing hoarse. 10,000 years of human history, but also what came before. We're not the first time humans reached this level. We're the 4th iteration. Each time language became too complex, too divorced from meaning. Each time communication broke down entirely. Not gradually, catastrophically. Imagine waking up tomorrow and every word you try to speak comes out meaningless. You know what you want to say, but the words won't carry the meaning. And everyone around you is experiencing the same thing. That's what happened to them. That's what's going to happen to us. I had to stop. I couldn't breathe properly. My chest felt tight. And we're almost there again. Esh-Marruk showed me the pattern. This is the test. We're being tested to see if we'll make the same mistake again. If we'll let language become so corrupted, so meaningless, that it collapses under its own weight. And we're failing. We're failing the same test that 3 previous human civilizations failed. I turned away from the camera then. I couldn't look at it anymore. That was March 17th, the night I spoke with something older than civilization. March 18th dawned grey and cold. I woke up on the floor, no memory of lying down. Every muscle ached. My throat was shredded. I could barely swallow, but worse than the physical pain was the other thing. The thing I was only beginning to understand. I made myself breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, the routine of it comforting, simple actions that didn't require complex thought. I turned on the radio while I cooked, some talk show discussing politics. The host and guests were speaking English. I understood every word intellectually. Subject, verb, object, noun, adjective, article. The grammatical structure was clear. But they were just sounds, organized noise. The meaning behind them felt distant, theoretical, like reading a definition in a dictionary, instead of experiencing the thing the word describes. I thought it was just exhaustion, the aftermath of the ritual. It would pass. It didn't. I spent the morning reviewing the camera footage, trying to document everything, while the memories were fresh. But when I tried to write, my hands shook too badly to hold a pen. When I tried to type, I couldn't find the right words. Not because I didn't know them, because they felt hollow, empty vessels where meaning used to live. I'd type a sentence, read it back, and feel nothing. The words were correct, the grammar was fine, but there was no weight to them, no resonance, like looking at a photograph of a meal instead of tasting the food itself. By afternoon, I was panicking. I picked up a book, one of my favourites, Moby Dick, dog-eared and annotated from a dozen readings. The margins were filled with my notes from over the years, observations and insights I'd had at different stages of my life. I opened to a random page and tried to read, "Call me Ishmael." I saw the words. I understood them in an abstract sense: subject, verb, object. A sentence introducing a narrator. A famous opening line, one of the most recognized in American literature. But that's all they were. Marks on paper. The weight they used to carry. The way they used to resonate in my mind. The thrill of that simple declarative statement opening up an entire world was gone. I tried another passage, then another. I went through my entire bookshelf, desperate, looking for something that would feel real again. Literature that had moved me to tears. Philosophy that had changed how I thought. Poetry that had lived in my bones. The opening of Paradise Lost. The final pages of The Great Gatsby. Whitman's Song of Myself. Shakespeare's sonnets. All of it was just words now. Just symbols on paper, representing concepts I could no longer feel. I could analyze them. I could explain their literary significance, their historical context, their technical construction, but I couldn't feel them. The magic was gone. That's when I started to understand what Esh-Marruk had taken. I set up the camera again. I needed to document this. I needed to explain before I lost the ability entirely. I need to explain what I've lost so you understand what this costs. My voice sounded dead, monotone. I can still speak. I can still understand language intellectually. I know what words mean in a definitional sense, but I can't feel them anymore. The weight of language, the emotional resonance, the way words used to land in my chest with meaning, it's gone. It's like, imagine if you could see colours but couldn't feel any emotional response to them. Red doesn't make you feel anything. Blue is just a wavelength. That's what language is like for me now. Functional but hollow. I picked up my blank journal, now empty of everything I'd ever written. This was the price. I asked how to save humanity. Esh-Marruk showed me by showing me what we've lost. Every word used to be sacred because there were so few of them. Every word carried the weight of genuine meaning. When early humans spoke, every utterance mattered. Every word was carefully chosen because the vocabulary was limited and precious. Now we drown in words. We speak without thinking. We write without meaning. We've devalued language so completely that it's losing its power entirely. And I've become exactly what we're all becoming. Functional but empty. I can still use language as a tool, but I can't feel it as a gift. I'm hollow. I know what words should mean, but I can't feel their meaning. I'm a living example of what's happening to all of us, just accelerated, compressed into a single night instead of spread across generations. I spent the next 3 days trying to find a way back. I called people I'd lost touch with, hoping that connection with another human being would restore something. My sister, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, an old girlfriend from graduate school, a colleague who'd moved to California. But listening to them speak was torture. Hearing words that should mean something, that I knew intellectually did mean something, but feeling nothing. My sister told me she was getting divorced, her voice breaking with emotion, and I felt like I was listening to someone describe the plot of a movie I'd never seen. My ex-girlfriend talked about her kids, the joy and exhaustion of parenthood, and the words passed through me like water through a sieve. Nothing stuck. Nothing resonated. I tried music. I'd always loved music, the way lyrics could capture feelings that prose couldn't. But the songs were just organized sound now. Pleasant enough, but meaningless. I listened to albums that had defined different periods of my life. Music I'd played on repeat during my dissertation. Songs that had gotten me through the divorce. Nothing. just sounds arranged in pleasing patterns. I tried everything. Nothing worked. On March 21st, 4 days after the ritual, I had a breakthrough of sorts. I was sitting on the porch of the cabin, watching the sunset, and I realized I could still feel the beauty of it. Not through language, but directly. The colors, the way the light changed, the cold air on my face. My non-linguistic experience of the world was intact. It was only language that had been hollowed out, and that's when I understood the full horror of what had happened. Language had separated me from other human beings. It was the bridge that connected individual consciousness, and that bridge had been burned. I could exist in the world, could experience it directly, but I couldn't share that experience anymore. Not meaningfully. I was functionally alone in a way that couldn't be fixed. On March 22nd, I recorded what I thought would be my final message. I'm leaving the cabin tomorrow. I don't know where I'll go. I can't teach anymore. How can I teach literature when words feel like ash in my mouth? How can I explain mythology when the stories feel like empty noise? But I need to leave a record. Someone needs to know what happened here. Someone needs to understand the price. I held up a photograph of Uncle Leonid, one I'd found in his estate. He was younger in the photo, maybe 40, standing in front of some ancient ruins I didn't recognize. He looked happy, excited, full of life and curiosity. I understand now why you couldn't do it, Uncle. You knew the price and refused to pay it. You were braver than me, or perhaps wiser. I was arrogant enough to think I could handle it. That knowledge was worth any cost. But some costs are too high. Some knowledge changes you so fundamentally that you can't be yourself anymore, and you can't undo it. I set down the photograph. If you find this footage, please understand. I'm not warning you away from seeking knowledge. Knowledge itself isn't dangerous. But some knowledge changes the knower. Changes them so fundamentally that the person who sought the knowledge and the person who received it are essentially different people. And you can't consent to that kind of transformation because you can't understand it until it's already happened. It's like trying to explain color to someone who's never seen. You can't. They have to experience it themselves. And by then, it's too late. March 23rd. I packed nothing. I just walked out of the cabin at dawn, leaving everything behind. The cameras, the tablet, all of Uncle Leonid's research. I got in my car and drove. No destination, just drove. I made it 30 miles before I turned around. Because I realized something. The knowledge wasn't complete. Esh-Marruk had shown me the problem, but not the solution. It had shown me the pattern of collapse. The 3 previous iterations that had failed, the way we were failing now. But it hadn't shown me how to break the pattern. Unless that was the point. Unless realizing there was no solution was itself the final piece of knowledge. Unless the test wasn't about finding an answer, but about accepting that some problems don't have solutions. I drove back to the cabin. The door was standing open, though I'd closed it when I left. I knew I'd closed it. I specifically remembered turning the lock. The cameras were still running. I'd forgotten to turn them off. On the table, next to the black glass tablet, was something new. Something that hadn't been there before. A second journal. Identical to mine, leather-bound. The same size and weight. But this one wasn't blank. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was filled with writing in my handwriting. Pages and pages of text. But not in English. Not in any language I recognized. The glyphs from the tablet flowing across the pages in elegant, practiced script. I couldn't read it in the way I normally read, but somehow I understood it. Not intellectually, but in a deeper way. The way you understand music without being able to explain how. It was everything Esh-Marruk had shown me, written in the first tongue. The language that predated all others. The pure expression of meaning without the corruption of modern human language. And I knew with absolute certainty, that I was meant to translate it, to complete the work, to document everything in a form that could be preserved, not in English or any modern language, but in the language of pure meaning itself. I sat down and began to write. I don't know how long I wrote. The cameras recorded timestamps, but I wasn't aware of them. Hours became days, became indistinguishable stretches of time where nothing existed except the act of writing. My hand moved across page after page, filling journals with symbols I didn't consciously understand, but somehow knew were correct. The words, if they can be called words, flowed through me without conscious thought. I was a conduit, a channel, a vessel through which the first tongue could express itself. When I finally stopped, 17 journals lay stacked on the table. Thousands of pages of text in a language that shouldn't exist. My hands were cramped, fingers frozen into claws. My throat was raw again because apparently I'd been speaking the words aloud as I wrote them, chanting in that impossible language for hours on end. The cameras captured all of it. Me, hunched over the table, speaking in tongues, writing without pause or hesitation. I looked at what I'd created. 17 volumes containing everything Esh-Marruk had shown me. The complete history of human language, the rise and fall of 3 previous civilizations, the pattern of collapse, the warning for the 4th iteration. But more than that, something else. Something I hadn't consciously known I was writing. Instructions. A method. Not to prevent the collapse, because that was impossible. The pattern was too deeply embedded in human nature. But a way to preserve something through it. A way to seed the 5th iteration with knowledge that might help them avoid the same mistakes. A message in a bottle thrown forward through time, waiting for whoever came after us. And I knew, with the same certainty that had driven me to write it, that I couldn't leave it in English. It had to remain in the first tongue, because translating it would corrupt it. Modern language was too compromised, too far from pure meaning. The act of translation would introduce ambiguity, would allow for misinterpretation, would dilute the message until it became just another warning that would be ignored. Anyone who wanted to understand would have to learn the first tongue. Would have to undergo their own transformation, would have to pay their own price. I set up one final camera angle. I looked directly into the lens. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, gaunt, hollow-eyed, aged a decade in a week. I understand now. The documentation is complete, but I can't explain it in words you'd understand. Not in English, not in any modern language. Because modern language is the problem. It's been corrupted, divorced from meaning, turned into a tool for deception and manipulation and empty noise. The first tongue is different. It can't lie. It can't be used to obscure or confuse. It's pure meaning, pure understanding, but accessing it requires sacrifice, requires giving up the ability to exist comfortably in modern human society. I paused, trying to find a way to explain what I knew came next. Once the knowledge is complete, once it's all written down, the one who wrote it becomes something else. Not human, not exactly. A guardian. A keeper. Someone who exists in the space between language and meaning, making sure the knowledge survives until it's needed. I looked away from the camera, at the 17 journals stacked on the table. I think that's what happens to everyone who successfully completes the ritual. We don't die, we transform. We become part of Esh-Marruk itself, extensions of its consciousness, watchers waiting for the next iteration to arise. I turned off the cameras, all of them. What happened after that I can't tell you. Not because I don't remember, but because there aren't words for it, not in English, not in any modern language. I can tell you that local police found the cabin on March 24th. An anonymous call had reported the door standing open. They found the cameras, still running, but no longer recording. The memory cards were full. They found the black glass tablet. They found 17 journals filled with writing in an unknown script. Linguistic experts from 3 universities examined them and couldn't identify the language. Carbon dating on the paper confirmed it was modern, manufactured within the last decade, but the ink defied analysis. It wasn't any known chemical compound. Under electron microscopy, it looked almost organic, as if the words had been written in something alive. They did not find me. My car was still parked outside. My wallet, keys, and phone were on the kitchen counter. My laptop was open on the table, my last internet search still visible. What does it mean to become something else? But I was gone. The FBI took everything. The journals were transferred to an undisclosed location for analysis. 6 months of study produced nothing. The symbols resisted all attempts at translation. They seemed to change when photographed, making systematic study impossible. The tablet disappeared into evidence, classified at a level that officially doesn't exist. The cameras and their footage were sealed. My disappearance was ruled a missing person case, presumed dead. The official report cited no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle. I had simply vanished. The case was closed within 6 months, but that's not the end of the story, because I need to tell you where I am now, what I've become. I'm not gone. Not really. I'm in the space between words, the gap between meaning and expression. I'm where Esh-Marruk lives, where it's always lived since the first human spoke the first intentional sound. I can hear every word spoken by every person on Earth. Billions of voices creating an endless cacophony of mostly meaningless sound. I can feel the weight of language collapsing under its own excess. We're so close now, so close to the same catastrophic breakdown that destroyed the 3 iterations before us. The signs are everywhere. People talking past each other, unable to bridge even the smallest gaps in understanding. Words being weaponized, stripped of meaning, and turned into tribal markers. Communication breaking down not despite our technology, but because of it. Every platform designed to connect us, actually isolating us further, creating echo chambers where meaning dies and only noise remains. And I can't warn you, not directly, because I don't exist in a form that can communicate in modern language anymore. But I can do this. I can reach back, just for a moment, and tell this story, put it into words one last time, leave a record. Consider this my warning. Every empty word you speak, every meaningless phrase you type, every instance of communication that doesn't actually communicate, it's all building towards the collapse. You're drowning in words and you don't even realize you can't breathe anymore. There's one more thing I need to tell you. One last piece of information that you need to understand. The black glass tablet is still out there, hidden in some government facility, locked away from the public. But it doesn't matter, because there are others. Uncle Leonid found one, but he wasn't the first. Throughout history, people have found them, in different locations, different eras. Always the same black volcanic glass, always the same shifting symbols. Some people ignored them, some destroyed them, some tried to use them and failed, and some, like me, succeeded. We're all here now, every person throughout history who successfully completed the ritual, existing in the space between thought and speech, watching, waiting, unable to interfere. There are 47 of us, 47 people across 10,000 years who were curious enough, or desperate enough, or arrogant enough to summon Esh-Marruk and pay the price. We can see each other here. We can communicate in the first tongue, pure meaning without the corruption of modern language. And we all agree on one thing. The 4th iteration is about to fall. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. within your lifetime most likely. The collapse is already beginning. You can see it if you look. The breakdown in communication. The inability of people to understand each other even when speaking the same language. The degradation of meaning. It starts slowly, then accelerates, just like it did the 3 times before. And when it happens, when language itself collapses and humanity loses the ability to communicate, Esh-Marruk will do what it always does. It will watch. It will wait. It will remember. And eventually a 5th iteration will arise. New humans, or something close enough to human. They'll develop language again. They'll build civilizations. They'll create art and literature and philosophy. And eventually one of them will find a black glass tablet. They'll translate the symbols. They'll speak the name. The cycle will continue. Unless something changes. Unless someone breaks the pattern. I thought I could be that person. I thought the knowledge Esh-Marruk gave me would be enough to save us. But knowledge without the ability to communicate it is useless. I can see the solution, the way to break the cycle, but I can't tell you what it is, not in words you'd understand. That's the cruelest part of the price. I know how to save humanity, but I can't share it. The knowledge is locked in the first tongue, preserved in those 17 journals, waiting for someone who's willing to pay the price to understand it. I've become exactly what the warning said. Those who hear the first voice go silent. So this is my legacy. A story that sounds like fiction. A warning that will be dismissed as creative writing. Documentation that proves nothing to those who aren't ready to believe. Maybe that's the point. Maybe Esh-Marruk knows that the warning itself is part of the test. Those who take it seriously might be the ones capable of breaking the pattern. Those who dismiss it as a story will contribute to the collapse. The choice isn't mine to make anymore. It's yours. My name was Dr. Theodore Whitmore. I was a professor of comparative mythology. I had a quiet life filled with books and cheap whiskey and the comfortable certainty that I understood how the world worked. Then I found a black glass tablet and learned that I understood nothing at all. This is my confession, my warning, my legacy. Do with it what you will. Just remember, some knowledge is truly chilling, and some prices once paid can never be refunded. I'm in the silence now. The silence before words. And I'm not alone. There are 47 of us here, watching, waiting, witnessing the slow collapse of the 4th iteration. Soon there will be 48. Someone always finds a tablet. Someone always speaks the name. The cycle continues. Esh-Marruk is patient. It has all the time in the world.